Most people live reacting rather than choosing. They drift from one distraction to the next, rarely pausing to consider if the path they are on is truly theirs. Every day, countless decisions are made from habit, impulse, or fear of discomfort, not clarity. The Stoics remind us that true freedom comes from mastering the mind, from seeing each moment clearly, and from acting with intention rather than being carried by circumstance. Imagine stepping into each day with awareness, letting wisdom, not impulse, guide your choices. There is a quiet pressure that grows when you know you are capable of more, but fail to align your actions with your principles. Growth, resilience, and inner peace are not given. They are cultivated through deliberate practice, reflection, and courage in the face of resistance. Each small act of self-mastery compounds into a life of integrity, calm strength, and focused energy, shaping not only what you achieve, but who you are becoming. Every decision, every thought, every pause is an opportunity to reclaim control and direct energy toward purpose. What might your life look like if you approached each moment deliberately, allowing clarity and intention to guide even the smallest choices? This is the path the Stoics describe, a life built on deliberate attention, consistent action, and the quiet accumulation of inner strength. Consider how often we carry yesterday's weight into today. Each morning, we step into the world with possibility, yet our minds remain tethered to what has already passed. Failures we thought buried, fears we hoped were silenced, moments of hesitation and regret. They linger quietly, shaping the way we think and act. These remnants of yesterday do not announce themselves, but they steer attention, distort priorities, and shrink the space where fresh choices might emerge. We may believe we are starting anew, but energy is often diluted by invisible chains. Every step toward a goal feels heavier than it should. Deciding to move forward is slowed by mental friction we fail to recognize. It is not the world holding us back. It is the unexamined weight of what we have already lived. The Stoics understood this deeply. Much of human suffering comes not from external events, but from clinging to impressions of the past. Epictetus wrote that people are disturbed not by things themselves, but by their view of them. Replaying old mistakes binds present choices to events that can no longer be changed. Attachment to these impressions becomes a subtle yet persistent barrier. It shapes how we perceive challenges, how we take risks, and how we trust ourselves. Old fears and regrets cast a shadow over every decision, coloring outcomes before they even occur. Beginning is never purely external. It starts with the inner state. Without releasing what no longer serves, every intention and goal is burdened by an unseen weight. Imagine waking each day with clarity, free from these invisible anchors. Attempting a task while carrying old mistakes feels heavier than approaching it with a mind uncluttered and calm. Momentum emerges not from force or effort alone, but from alignment between purpose and mental space. When emotional clutter is released, actions feel lighter, challenges feel manageable, and opportunities feel expansive. This is inner freedom. Marcus Aurelius observed, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The first step is not action alone. It is clearing what blocks the mind. Only when we acknowledge and release these residues can obstacles transform into steps forward instead of chains. The persistence of unresolved experiences is often hidden beneath busyness. Tasks, to-do lists, and distractions create the illusion of movement while the mind remains tethered to the past. Moving without clearing mental clutter rarely produces true momentum. Progress becomes fragmented. We may achieve small wins or check boxes, but the internal stagnation persists. Even disciplined effort can be misdirected if attention is divided between what is real now and what is no longer relevant. The Stoics cultivated a mental landscape where energy is directed toward what can be shaped, chosen, and mastered. They called this detachment, not from life, but from what life no longer requires. Closing old chapters is an act of discipline, not denial. It does not erase memory or pretend failure did not exist. It acknowledges the truth of experience while consciously choosing where to invest attention moving forward. Seneca advised, "We are always complaining that our days are few and acting as though there would be no end of them." Days are finite, and carrying unnecessary burdens consumes the only resource we cannot replenish: present focus. By identifying what is truly over, recognizing lessons learned, and releasing what continues to drain vitality, we reclaim mental clarity and the capacity for decisive action. Emotional clutter, once released, transforms from hindrance into insight, a record of what was faced, survived, and no longer needs space in the mind. Once that clarity settles in, something becomes obvious. You don't need to fix every mistake. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to chase validation from those who never offered respect. Your presence, your attention, your energy, managed consciously, speaks more powerfully than reaction ever could. Progress is not the result of force, but of deliberate alignment. When you act from a place of clarity, fear diminishes, hesitation fades, and choices become naturally consistent with the person you intend to be. Each small act compounds over time, quietly shaping a life of calm strength and intentional direction. If you value clarity, discipline, and living intentionally, subscribing here is a step toward nurturing your mind, strengthening your character, and practicing deliberate living every day. By joining this community, you engage with ideas that sharpen perception, encourage reflection, and support the consistent application of wisdom in your life. Let each decision you make reinforce the path you are building for yourself, and let this channel serve as a guide to cultivating your own clarity, focus, and inner freedom. The process of releasing yesterday is not always linear. Memories, regrets, and fears can resurface unexpectedly, and sometimes the mind resists letting go because familiarity feels safer than the unknown. Yet familiarity with what no longer serves is a subtle form of imprisonment. Carl Jung observed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Many of us unconsciously allow the weight of past experiences to govern decisions, and we label the resulting inertia as circumstance, luck, or lack of ability. Recognizing the presence of these unconscious drivers is the first step toward reclaiming agency. When the mind becomes aware of the attachments that hinder action, the first movement toward freedom has already begun. Step by step, moment by moment, the act of letting go transforms internal friction into clarity. Each time attention is redirected from what is gone to what is possible, we reinforce the practice of presence, which in turn strengthens resilience. The Stoics framed this as the proper use of reason, to discern between what is within our control and what is not, and to invest energy solely where influence exists. By treating the past as a completed chapter and giving full attention to the present, we allow ourselves to act with precision, courage, and intention. Every decision made with an uncluttered mind carries more weight, has greater impact, and accumulates toward meaningful progress in ways distracted effort never can. Ultimately, momentum is born not from sheer effort or willpower, but from the alignment of purpose with mental clarity. The ability to act freely, to choose courageously, and to pursue goals effectively depends on first clearing the internal field of the residual weight of what no longer serves. By confronting and releasing the attachments of yesterday, regrets, fears, unfinished business, we create the conditions for energy to flow unhindered, for decisions to be made decisively, and for life to be lived with intentionality. The past remains a teacher, but it no longer dictates the present. In that space, momentum emerges naturally, and each forward step becomes both lighter and more profound, a true reflection of deliberate living and practiced wisdom. Once the past has been released, The next consideration is the energy you bring into every action. It is not enough to have a cleared mind or to have shed the weight of previous regrets. The way we engage with the present moment determines the trajectory of all efforts. Goals, as they are usually conceived, are external markers. They exist on paper, on lists, on charts, as measurements of progress or success. They are rigid, finite, and sometimes abstract. Checking a box does not guarantee meaningful transformation. Energy, on the other hand, is persistent. It moves, it accumulates, it resonates. It is the invisible current that informs every thought, choice, and behavior. It is the soil in which habits grow, the wind that fills the sails of intention. Without conscious direction, it can scatter in chaos, diluting effort and blurring clarity. The Stoics recognized this principle long ago. They emphasized that identity precedes action, that what you become internally dictates the effectiveness of external deeds. Epictetus observed that we are shaped by the choices we repeat, not merely by what we aim to achieve. Who you are becoming matters more than any outcome you pursue, because the outer world is constantly shifting, whereas your inner disposition determines whether you can navigate those shifts with integrity. A moment of resistance may appear unbearable, yet if your identity is aligned with virtue and discipline, it becomes a test of refinement rather than defeat. Each choice, no matter how small, is a thread in the fabric of character. You can set goals without cultivating the energy to sustain them, but they will falter like structures built on sand. Conversely, by anchoring your energy to a principle, a virtue, or a value, you create the foundation for consistency and resilience that endures far beyond transient motivation. One practical approach to channel this energy is to select a guiding principle, a single word that anchors behavior and informs decisions. This word is more than a slogan. It is a lens through which all actions are interpreted. It might be discipline, focus, patience, or growth. Each time you are tempted to deviate from your intentions, it serves as a reminder of the identity you are cultivating. A checklist can direct attention, but it cannot alter the underlying patterns of thought that determine whether the steps are taken deliberately or perfunctorily. Energy must be embodied. A word functions as a compass, consistently pointing toward the type of person you wish to become. It primes your mind to notice opportunities aligned with that identity, reinforces habits that support it, and strengthens resolve when the path grows difficult. Choosing the right energy is a deliberate act. It requires reflection and honesty about the kind of individual who can act effectively, not simply who wants to see results. This principle of identity over outcome applies universally. Consider how often effort is wasted when actions are inconsistent with who you believe yourself to be. Someone might resolve to exercise, to write, to learn, or to create, yet their energy remains scattered, reactive, or half-hearted. Without a guiding internal compass, they are pulled by external stimuli, distraction, fatigue, comparison, self-doubt. The Stoics taught that the inner citadel, the fortress of reason, virtue, and self-governance, must be fortified first, because it is from this core that outward behavior flows. When energy is anchored in a consistent principle, the same effort produces disproportionate impact, yielding results that are coherent, cumulative, and aligned with enduring growth. Each moment becomes a choice, not a reaction. Each action reflects deliberate intention rather than habit or circumstance. Even small acts, when infused with conscious energy, accumulate into significant change. Discipline exercised in one area reinforces patience in another. Focus honed in study improves the quality of work and relationships alike. Growth pursued sincerely reshapes perception, creating awareness of previously unnoticed opportunities. This is not abstract philosophy, it is applied psychology. Neuroscience shows that repeated value-aligned behaviors rewire neural pathways, solidifying patterns that support long-term objectives. Energy, when intentionally directed, does not dissipate, It compounds. Each choice, no matter how seemingly trivial, contributes to the identity from which future decisions flow. This is why a single guiding word can be transformative. It is the seed from which coherence, motivation, and sustained effort emerge. Identity-centered energy also clarifies priorities. When decisions are filtered through a guiding principle, distractions lose their appeal. Tasks that once felt urgent but were misaligned with personal growth reveal themselves as trivial. External validation becomes secondary to internal consistency. The Stoics emphasized this alignment, teaching that tranquility arises from living according to reason and virtue, not chasing accolades or transient success. Energy directed by identity provides clarity, not only in action but in judgment. It allows for discernment between what is necessary and what is superfluous, what contributes to genuine progress and what merely consumes time. When energy flows in alignment with purpose, choices are simpler, effort is concentrated, and momentum builds naturally. Reflection strengthens this process. Daily attention to how energy is expended allows for adjustment and refinement. One might notice where intention slips, where habits drift, or where impulses are unconsciously influenced by past conditioning. Awareness itself is a form of power, enabling recalibration before patterns solidify into stagnation. Seneca observed that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Energy wasted in misaligned action is irretrievable. It diminishes potential. By regularly assessing whether each action aligns with the guiding principle, the mind remains adaptive and focused. Energy is not merely a force, it is a reflection of choice, and choice demands vigilance. Ultimately, the energy you embody determines the nature of progress. Goals, checklists, or external measures may serve as markers, but without consistent, principled energy, they are hollow. Growth, resilience, and mastery emerge from repeated alignment between action and identity. The habit of consciously choosing the type of energy you bring to every interaction, every task, and every decision strengthens the mind, deepens focus, and amplifies results. The energy that drives success is intentional, constant, and reflective of who you are becoming rather than what you hope to achieve. Each moment of choice, each decision to act in accordance with a guiding principle reinforces the architecture of character. When energy is aligned, the smallest acts resonate profoundly, and progress no longer depends on fluctuating motivation or circumstances. The focus shifts from outcomes to cultivation, from results to refinement, from temporary effort to enduring transformation. This is the invisible infrastructure of achievement, the sustained, deliberate energy that underpins meaningful accomplishment, the essence of living deliberately and wisely. Energy alone, no matter how focused or intense, is insufficient to produce lasting results. Without structure, momentum dissipates, and effort can be scattered in ways that feel productive but yield little real progress. Most people pursue outcomes without first considering the architecture required to sustain them. They envision transformation, a stronger body, a thriving business, a creative achievement, yet overlook the consistent framework that supports these outcomes. You might exercise sporadically, but ignore recovery, sleep, and nutrition, assuming effort alone will carry the day. You might launch ideas and projects with passion, but neglect the repeated rituals of learning, testing, and refining that determine whether the venture thrives or falters. Without systems, energy becomes reactive, caught between distraction, urgency, and fleeting inspiration rather than being channeled with deliberate force toward meaningful accomplishment. The Stoics understood that virtue, like any skill, is habitual. Progress does not occur in sudden, miraculous leaps, but through the accumulation of repeated, principle-aligned actions. Epictetus reminded that it is not what happens to us, but how we use what happens that matters. Each small deliberate act contributes to a larger pattern, shaping character, reinforcing discipline, and creating the conditions for sustainable success. Systems, in this sense, are not merely organizational tools, they are extensions of internal alignment. They translate intention into tangible reality by creating reliable pathways for energy to flow uninterrupted from thought to execution. By embedding actions within structures designed to support growth, the randomness of effort is replaced with predictable momentum, turning aspiration into achievement. The psychology of habit formation underscores the importance of structural consistency. Research demonstrates that behaviors repeated in predictable patterns are more likely to become automatic, reducing cognitive load and preserving mental energy for higher-level challenges. By establishing routines and frameworks that align with your goals, the energy invested in each action is magnified. The Stoics, too, emphasized daily practice and ritual as means of internalizing virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote that life should be approached as a series of tasks, each performed with careful attention and integrity, for excellence emerges through repetition rather than fleeting inspiration. Systems operationalize this principle, ensuring that values and intentions are translated into reliable behavior, even when motivation fluctuates. The beauty of systems lies in their ability to transform intention into inevitable outcomes. When every action, no matter how trivial, is nested within a deliberate structure, randomness diminishes. Luck is replaced with reliability, effort is magnified, and results begin to compound. This principle applies to every domain of life. Writing a book, mastering a skill, cultivating relationships, or building a business all require infrastructure, schedules, feedback loops, checkpoints, and rituals that keep progress on track. Systems provide the accountability and continuity that mere passion cannot sustain. The Stoics emphasized that virtue is strengthened by practice, not aspiration. By operationalizing this philosophy, systems become the invisible engine converting potential into reality, transforming fleeting energy into sustained achievement. The discipline of designing systems is itself an exercise in intentional living. It requires reflection, foresight, and honesty about what is truly necessary to achieve meaningful outcomes. It is not enough to act with willpower alone. Effort must be embedded within a framework that supports sustainability, resilience, and feedback. Seneca observed that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Without preparation, the structures, routines, and frameworks, energy is wasted and opportunity is missed. By creating systems aligned with principles and values, you ensure that when challenges arise or opportunities present themselves, you are ready to respond effectively, consistently, and with maximum impact. Epictetus observed that well-being is attained by little and little, and nevertheless is no little thing. Systems embody this principle. By structuring energy through deliberate, repeated actions, incremental progress accumulates into meaningful transformation. Energy alone may ignite effort, but systems ensure it burns steadily, producing the light that illuminates the path to mastery, growth, and fulfillment. The environment we inhabit exerts a far greater influence on our actions than sheer willpower ever can. Most people overestimate the power of motivation, thinking that desire alone is sufficient to sustain effort, to maintain focus, and to persist through difficulty. Motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls, shaped by mood, fatigue, and circumstance. It is unreliable, subject to the constant fluctuation of internal and external pressures. Conditions, on the other hand, are persistent. They do not waver with emotion or circumstance. The spaces we occupy, the objects we surround ourselves with, the habits we normalize within our daily routines, these all shape behavior silently, subtly, yet profoundly. A cluttered room, a disorganized schedule, an environment that rewards distraction and interrupts focus will inevitably erode even the strongest intentions. Conversely, spaces designed to reinforce purpose and attention act as scaffolding for consistent action. Energy, when channeled through intentional surroundings, is amplified, directed, and made enduring. Physical surroundings, even more than abstract willpower, influence performance. If the goal is to develop strength or maintain health, then the tools, spaces, and cues present in daily life play a decisive role. A gym that is accessible and welcoming encourages exercise. A kitchen stocked with nutritious options reduces the friction between intention and execution. Conversely, environments misaligned with goals test discipline constantly, forcing the mind to expend energy simply to resist temptation or overcome structural obstacles. Energy that could be devoted to growth is instead consumed by reactive effort. This misalignment is rarely recognized consciously because its effects accumulate gradually. Yet the results are clear. When environments encourage distraction or require constant self-restraint, consistency falters. Success is rarely about working harder against chaos. It is about designing conditions where energy flows naturally toward purpose. The influence of environment extends beyond physical spaces into the information and stimuli we allow into our minds. Thoughts, media, conversations, and digital inputs all shape cognition, emotional state, and priorities. If the brain is constantly bombarded with noise, triviality, or negativity, it becomes fatigued, less capable of discernment, and more susceptible to distraction. By curating inputs intentionally, selecting books, media, social interactions, and content that support growth and understanding, we build mental spaces that mirror physical organization. This is an essential component of the Stoic approach, aligning external conditions with internal rationality, ensuring that what surrounds us strengthens rather than diminishes the capacity for reasoned action. Each stimulus becomes either an ally or a subtle underminer, and the conscious individual must choose which to invite and which to exclude. The dangers of ignoring environmental design are subtle yet profound. Individuals often believe that persistence alone can overcome misaligned conditions, but repeated exposure to chaos, clutter, or distraction erodes resilience over time. Attention becomes fragmented, decision-making impaired, and energy wasted on managing friction rather than executing purpose. Even the strongest intentions falter against unstructured surroundings. Plato, in his reflections on habit and virtue, suggested that repeated exposure shapes character subtly yet inevitably. Similarly, when external conditions are chaotic or unsupportive, the mind develops compensatory patterns, reactivity, procrastination, and diminished clarity that undermine goals. Energy without supportive context is diluted, scattered, and often rendered ineffective despite effort or desire. Intentional environmental design is a form of self-respect. It signals to the mind that the present moment, the task at hand, and the goals pursued are worthy of support. By reducing friction, removing distractions, and arranging surroundings to favor deliberate action, the individual honors both the effort required and the potential of the self. This design is practical, psychological, and philosophical. It reflects the Stoic principle that what is within our control, our thoughts, our habits, our environment, should be managed in accordance with reason, enabling virtue and excellence. The focus shifts from struggling against circumstance to shaping it deliberately, transforming obstacles into allies through thoughtful preparation. The path to mastery is rarely straight. It is uneven, filled with trials, setbacks, and moments of doubt that test the resolve of even the most committed. Most people fail not because they lack ability or insight, but because they demand perfection from themselves too early in the process. They expect immediate clarity, seamless execution, and constant progress, and when the inevitable imperfection appears, they falter. Fear of failure becomes a self-imposed barrier, discouraging action and creating the illusion that talent alone is insufficient. The Stoics recognized this tendency, understanding that control lies not over the unpredictable world outside, but over how we choose to respond within it. It is not the absence of obstacles that defines mastery, but the capacity to navigate them with discernment, patience, and disciplined persistence. By reframing missteps not as evidence of inadequacy, but as essential components of growth, the individual begins to see the messy middle as the true laboratory of progress. Progress, in its deepest sense, is born from engagement with imperfection. Growth occurs in the tension between what is feared and what is necessary, between the unknown and the attempt to understand it. Each act of trial, each tentative step forward, contains within it the seeds of competence, resilience, and insight. By allowing yourself to stumble, to iterate, to experiment without preemptive judgment, you cultivate the internal flexibility needed for sustained development. Repetition in the face of uncertainty refines skill, strengthens the mind, and transforms anxiety into familiarity. This is a principle the Stoics emphasized. Life is an ongoing exercise in aligning choices with reason, in acting in accordance with virtue, and in cultivating resilience by facing challenges directly rather than avoiding them. What appears as imperfection is often the crucible in which mastery is forged. Failure is an inevitable teacher. When it occurs, it exposes gaps in understanding, flaws in preparation, and the limits of current knowledge. Rather than resisting it, a person pursuing mastery can treat failure as data, a mirror reflecting both strengths and weaknesses. This requires detachment from ego, a hallmark of Stoic philosophy, which teaches that self-worth is not contingent on external achievement, but on the quality of intention and effort. Each setback becomes an opportunity to refine strategies, adjust tactics, and build mental resilience. By consistently choosing to act despite uncertainty, individuals cultivate a type of inner strength that allows them to navigate progressively more complex challenges. The discomfort that arises in these moments is not an obstacle, but an indicator of meaningful engagement with growth. Imperfect action also develops the psychological capacity to tolerate uncertainty. When you measure progress by learning rather than flawless execution, you build resilience and adaptive intelligence. Cognitive rigidity dissolves, replaced by curiosity and flexible problem-solving. This creates a virtuous cycle. As one grows accustomed to navigating imperfection, fear diminishes, confidence rises, and the ability to act decisively in ambiguous situations strengthens. Small, repeated efforts, made without attachment to perfection, compound into mastery because they cultivate both skill and psychological endurance. By focusing on the process rather than the final product, each choice is invested with attention, insight, and intentionality, and progress becomes a natural consequence of disciplined engagement. The measurement of success shifts when mastery is understood in this way. Instead of evaluating achievement solely by external markers, it is more productive to assess engagement, consistency, and learning. Progress is built on the overlooked, imperfect steps, the early attempts that do not yet produce visible results, the exercises repeated in obscurity, the small adjustments made in response to feedback. Seneca emphasized that it is not the grandeur of accomplishments, but the diligence of effort that defines the good life. By embedding action within this perspective, the individual reframes mistakes as integral to competence, setbacks as informative rather than destructive, and uncertainty as a natural companion of meaningful endeavor. Mastery is cultivated in the space where effort, reflection, and adaptation intersect, rather than in moments of effortless achievement. Perfectionism, when internalized, undermines progress. The fear of doing something incorrectly can prevent action entirely, halting momentum before it begins. When energy is reserved for avoiding mistakes instead of practicing skill, the potential for growth diminishes. The Stoics taught that control lies within, not in external circumstances. The mind's discipline determines the outcomes it can achieve. By embracing the inevitability of imperfection, individuals reclaim the capacity to act, experiment, and iterate without the paralytic burden of idealized expectations. Through repeated imperfect engagement, competence accumulates and the extraordinary emerges from consistent, deliberate effort. Ultimately, mastery is an emergent property of persistent action in the presence of imperfection. By allowing mistakes, embracing iteration, and focusing on learning rather than flawless execution, the impossible becomes routine and the unfamiliar becomes familiar. Each step, no matter how small or imperfect, contributes to the architecture of skill, resilience, and wisdom. Progress is built in the overlooked spaces, in moments of tension between fear and action, in the willingness to continue despite uncertainty. Socrates observed that the unexamined life is not worth living, a reminder that deliberate engagement, reflection, and courageous action are inseparable from the pursuit of excellence. In the messy, iterative process of imperfect action, mastery is quietly, inevitably constructed. Vision alone is insufficient unless it is fully experienced within the mind and body. To simply conceptualize a goal is not enough. The mind does not respond to abstractions in the way it responds to lived experience. Imagining the outcome as a distant destination, detached from the effort required to reach it, often produces fleeting motivation that vanishes under the weight of reality. True alignment between intention and action requires that you inhabit the vision as though it is already unfolding, that you feel its texture, its challenges, and its subtle victories as vividly as you would in the present moment. This embodiment is not mere fantasy, it is a rehearsal, a preparation of the mind and nervous system for the choices, risks, and discomforts that must be navigated to achieve meaningful results. Without this, even the clearest vision remains a faint outline, incapable of compelling consistent effort. Consider how the mind responds to repeated sensory and emotional engagement. Neuroscience demonstrates that the brain encodes imagined experiences in a manner similar to real ones. Each time a scenario is vividly visualized, neural circuits associated with emotion, planning, and motor coordination are activated. This is why elite performers across domains, athletes, musicians, orators, rehearse outcomes repeatedly in their mind before executing them in reality. The Stoics understood this principle intuitively. They practiced mental visualization, imagining themselves encountering adversity, maintaining composure, and acting with reason rather than impulse. By repeatedly preparing in the mind, they trained their responses and strengthened the internal frameworks that govern behavior. This is a subtle but powerful tool. Imagining effort, struggle, and success primes the body and mind to respond effectively when real-world challenges arise. Vision without emotional depth is shallow. It is not enough to see the final result or to know the steps abstractly. The mind requires felt experience to create a coherent, actionable plan. The pride of small victories, the tension of difficult choices, the focus required to sustain disciplined effort, all of these must be felt in the imagination before they can be executed consistently in reality. Emotional engagement transforms a distant idea into an internal reality, one that shapes behavior automatically and instinctively. The brain, when repeatedly exposed to imagined effort combined with emotion, begins to treat these experiences as familiar patterns. What once felt intimidating becomes manageable. What once required conscious effort begins to occur with fluidity. Without this internal rehearsal, execution depends entirely on external cues, motivation, and chance, leaving consistency precarious and success unpredictable. The process of mental rehearsal also cultivates resilience. When challenges and discomfort are rehearsed in the mind before they appear in reality, they lose their capacity to paralyze. Anticipating the strain, visualizing the decision, and feeling the perseverance required transforms fear into familiarity. Each imagined obstacle becomes a bridge to skill rather than a barrier. The Stoics understood that preparation reduces the power of external events over our inner state. Marcus Aurelius observed that by anticipating difficulty, one diminishes its influence. Similarly, by feeling the experience of disciplined action in advance, the mind aligns with the effort required and action emerges naturally even when external circumstances are challenging. Embodying vision is also about synchronizing mind, body, and emotion. Discipline, focus, and persistence are not purely cognitive phenomena, they are somatic as well. Feeling the posture of confidence, the rhythm of sustained effort, the subtle tension and relaxation associated with mastery primes both body and mind for consistent execution. Each act of visualization strengthens neural pathways, improves decision-making, and cultivates endurance. Over time, these rehearsed experiences reduce hesitation, increase clarity, and foster a deep sense of agency. Without integrating emotional and physical dimensions, vision remains an idea in isolation, interesting in theory, but insufficient to guide consistent action. The scope of rehearsal extends beyond individual effort to the integration of the process itself. It is not only the outcome that must be imagined, but the daily choices, the incremental achievements, and the moments of friction along the way. Seeing oneself navigating challenges, adhering to discipline, and maintaining composure under pressure creates a mental map that guides real-world behavior. This map serves as a cognitive and emotional scaffold, allowing the mind to act efficiently, intuitively, and in alignment with long-term goals. Each time you imagine yourself exercising patience, making disciplined choices, or persevering through discomfort, the vision becomes more tangible, the pathway clearer, and the body more prepared to respond. Vision becomes actionable when it is felt deeply and repeatedly. Each imagined iteration reinforces neural, emotional, and cognitive structures, reducing the discrepancy between intention and execution. Goals, when isolated in abstraction, remain susceptible to distraction, procrastination, and self-doubt. By embedding vision within lived experience in the mind, by feeling both effort and reward, you cultivate a consistent internal environment where action arises naturally. This alignment reduces reliance on external motivation and transforms vision from a passive hope into an internalized guide for daily choices. It is through this integration that consistency becomes achievable, challenges become navigable, and progress becomes inevitable. Vision, deeply felt and repeatedly rehearsed, becomes the invisible infrastructure of achievement. It shapes perception, primes decision-making, and fosters resilience in the face of adversity. Without feeling, vision is a fragile abstract. With feeling, it becomes a lived reality guiding every step. When intention, emotion, and embodiment are aligned, the mind does not simply hope or aspire. It acts with clarity, confidence, and consistency. Each choice, small or large, becomes an expression of the rehearsed vision, transforming abstract goals into achievable outcomes and potential into realized mastery. Resistance is often misunderstood. Most people treat it as a barrier, a signal that something should be avoided, that discomfort indicates danger or inadequacy. Yet resistance is not inherently negative. It is a guide. Fear, hesitation, uncertainty, and the subtle tension that rises when confronting unfamiliar challenges are not signs of failure, they are markers of growth. Neuroscience describes this as prediction error. The brain recoils instinctively when faced with what is new, untested, or outside habitual patterns, even when the experience is ultimately beneficial. This recoil is not a verdict of inability, it is the mind alerting itself to novelty. Recognizing resistance as feedback rather than obstruction allows the individual to approach difficulty with clarity and discernment. Each encounter with discomfort becomes an opportunity to calibrate attention, to strengthen resolve, and to practice agency in a deliberate way that transforms fear into purposeful action. The Stoics understood that courage does not consist in the absence of fear, but in the mastery of action despite it. Marcus Aurelius emphasized that challenges and adversity are not external punishments, but tests of internal virtue. Acting in the presence of fear strengthens the mind, cultivates resilience, and develops the capacity to navigate life's inevitable uncertainties. Discomfort should be reframed as a natural and necessary companion on the path to meaningful achievement. Each time hesitation arises, the mind is presented with a choice: to resist or to engage. That choice, repeated consistently, reinforces agency and gradually diminishes the paralyzing influence of fear. Resistance, therefore, is not a signal to retreat, but a cue to align attention, summon reason, and proceed with deliberate intent. Discomfort and hesitation are also crucial for testing the robustness of goals and intentions. Tasks that are easy to execute rarely reveal the strength of resolve or the depth of commitment. Real growth emerges when effort is invested precisely where resistance is strongest, when one acts despite the pull of avoidance. The Stoics cultivated this principle by viewing adversity as an instrument of virtue. Each moment of tension provides feedback on the alignment between action and principle. Resistance functions as a mirror, reflecting both weaknesses and untapped potential. By engaging deliberately with discomfort, the mind develops a reliable gauge of capacity, and every choice to act reinforces competence, confidence, and agency. Working with resistance requires discernment. Not all discomfort should be pursued blindly, but careful consideration can distinguish between genuine obstacles and signals of growth. A task may feel intimidating because it challenges comfort, habitual patterns, or ego, rather than because it is truly inappropriate. When the mind is willing to act despite initial discomfort, it expands the zone of familiarity, creating space for skill, insight, and mastery to develop. This approach transforms resistance from a source of paralysis into a source of momentum. Each act of engagement compounds, not only producing tangible progress, but also reinforcing the psychological architecture necessary for sustained achievement. Resistance also offers insight into priorities and alignment. Tasks and challenges that provoke discomfort frequently coincide with areas of significant growth or strategic importance. Avoidance often signals the boundary of skill, the threshold of learning, or the edge of personal development. By interpreting resistance as a guide, the individual can allocate attention and energy more effectively. Actions that feel difficult, unfamiliar, or uncomfortable are not necessarily indicators of misjudgment. They may be signposts pointing toward areas where effort yields the greatest long-term benefit. When approached intentionally, each act of engagement converts resistance into leverage, compounding both skill and psychological resilience. Ultimately, mastery is built not in the absence of fear, but through consistent engagement with it. Each encounter with resistance strengthens the internal capacity to act decisively, to navigate uncertainty, and to perform in alignment with purpose. By reframing discomfort as informative rather than prohibitive, the individual transforms hesitation into fuel, fear into opportunity, and obstacles into a vehicle for growth. Aristotle observed that excellence is formed in the repetition of deliberate action. Repeated encounters with resistance are precisely the moments that shape competence, endurance, and skill. The path of progress is illuminated not by ease, but by the courage to act when action feels difficult, unfamiliar, or uncomfortable. Every instance of resistance, when approached with awareness and intentionality, contributes to a compounding trajectory of development. It reveals limits, reinforces discipline, and strengthens resolve. Each choice to act despite discomfort becomes a building block of agency and mastery, creating a life in which courage is habitual and skill is accumulated. The mind gradually learns to perceive resistance not as an enemy, but as a necessary instrument of growth. Through this lens, fear, hesitation, and discomfort are not threats to success. They are integral markers on the journey toward it. The disciplined engagement with resistance transforms uncertainty into opportunity, challenge into mastery, and effort into reliable progress. Seneca noted that difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Resistance, in its many forms, functions precisely in this way. By engaging deliberately with discomfort, embracing challenge without avoidance, and acting consistently despite fear, the mind develops the internal resilience required for sustained achievement. Each moment of hesitation navigated, each uncomfortable action taken, compounds into a trajectory of mastery that no amount of easy effort can replicate. Resistance is guidance, feedback, and training ground combined. Those who learn to work with it rather than against it convert obstacles into fuel, fear into strength, and hesitation into decisive, principle-driven action. Accountability magnifies progress in ways that raw discipline alone cannot achieve. Effort invested in isolation is fragile, motivation falters, perception clouds, and the mind can rationalize shortcuts, postponements, or compromises without external reflection. Humans are inherently social creatures, and the structures of community profoundly shape behavior. When action is observed, when goals are shared with a thoughtful group, and when progress is engaged within a framework of collective expectation, momentum compounds. Shared energy amplifies individual effort, creating a force greater than the sum of its parts. Discipline practiced in solitude is limited by the boundaries of self-perception and self-imposed constraints, whereas accountability transforms intention into an observable, measurable, and meaningful process. The Stoics understood that character is developed in interaction through relationships that both challenge and support, offering feedback that mirrors virtue or exposes weakness. The right circle acts as a mirror, reflecting back patterns of thought and behavior, revealing gaps in alignment between aspiration and action. The nuance of accountability lies not in public performance alone, but in intentional engagement with the right people. Not every observer contributes to growth. Some may judge without understanding, criticize without insight, or dilute focus through comparison. True accountability arises in a circle of individuals who comprehend your path, who ask probing questions, and who maintain standards aligned with development rather than ego reinforcement. This alignment is subtle but powerful. It creates an environment in which choices are scrutinized in service of principle rather than perception. Each action becomes consequential, not because of external pressure, but because of commitment to a collective standard that reflects shared values. Energy, when exposed to this dynamic, is directed more efficiently, and the compounding effect of repeated observed effort accelerates progress. Accountability also mitigates the limitations of self-assessment. Individuals are often poor judges of their own consistency, effort, and alignment with principle. Bias, fatigue, and emotional fluctuations distort perception. By embedding effort within a network that provides insight, feedback, and perspective, the mind becomes more accurately calibrated. Discrepancies between intention and action are illuminated, habits are adjusted, and focus remains tethered to meaningful progress. Public commitment, when paired with thoughtful support, converts ephemeral intentions into measurable reality. Each act, when observed and reinforced, compounds not only external achievement, but internal consistency, gradually building competence, confidence, and self-trust. The manner in which accountability is structured matters deeply. It is not about visibility for performance's sake, nor about superficial approval. It is about deliberate engagement with individuals who understand nuance, who value growth, and who maintain standards that reinforce integrity. A single misaligned observer can distort perception, undermine confidence, or dilute attention. Conversely, a well-aligned network transforms pressure into clarity, uncertainty into motivation, and observation into actionable insight. Aristotle noted that humans are naturally social and that excellence is cultivated through interaction and engagement with others. By participating in intentional social structures, the individual leverages collective wisdom, amplifies the consequences of action, and gains a framework in which effort accumulates reliably. Small wins celebrated within the right circle have disproportionate influence. Each acknowledgement of progress reinforces the habit loop. Effort produces recognition, recognition reinforces focus, and focus produces more deliberate effort. Over time, this cycle compounds, producing sustained engagement and accelerated growth. Dopamine signaling is not trivial. It provides the internal reward necessary to sustain consistent behavior over long periods. A single private effort may lack reinforcement, but repeated, observed, and recognized effort becomes self-sustaining. Shared momentum multiplies the impact of even modest progress, creating a trajectory that outpaces solitary effort. This is why social alignment and careful curation of accountability partners are as critical as the individual work itself. The Stoics understood the subtle power of community in shaping character. While self-mastery is ultimately an internal process, it is cultivated through interaction, observation, and reflection. Guidance, challenge, and validation provided by thoughtful peers enhance discernment, sharpen judgment, and reinforce the alignment of action with principle. Marcus Aurelius emphasized that humans are not isolated agents. We are social beings, and our character develops through the context of relationships and shared endeavor. By embedding personal effort within structures of accountability, individuals transform action from isolated exertion into a coordinated, visible, and sustainable pursuit of mastery. Ultimately, accountability transforms the intangible potential of intention into tangible, sustained action. By surrounding oneself with those who understand, challenge, and reinforce growth, energy is magnified, discipline is strengthened, and habits compound in ways solitary effort cannot achieve. Each commitment, each report of progress, each acknowledgement of effort establishes momentum that propels further engagement. The mind learns to internalize the rhythm of consistency, the discipline of perseverance, and the clarity of purpose. Socrates observed that education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel, and accountability functions similarly. It ignites sustained effort, nurtures development, and amplifies the results of deliberate action. When structured intentionally, it is the invisible architecture that ensures effort becomes habitual, learning becomes reinforced, and mastery becomes inevitable. Through accountability, intention is converted into action. Energy is directed efficiently, and each effort, however small, becomes meaningful within a cumulative trajectory. When effort is public in the right sense, and observation is coupled with understanding, even minor progress compounds into significant achievement. Growth becomes measurable, consistent, and reinforced. The structures of accountability provide the scaffolding that allows individual effort to be magnified, repeated, and sustained. In this way, the invisible influence of others becomes a powerful force, accelerating development, shaping character, and ensuring that consistent effort is both observed and internalized. Every choice you make, every small step you take, shapes the person you are becoming. Growth is not sudden. It is forged in clarity, discipline, courage, and consistent action, quietly building momentum until what once felt impossible becomes natural. Remember, the strength to act, the resilience to endure, and the wisdom to persevere are cultivated within you in the space where intention meets effort. Let each day be a deliberate step toward the life you are capable of creating. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal and for dedicating your attention to growth, reflection, and mastery. If you want to continue expanding your perspective, explore one of the suggested videos on the screen now. and let the practice of intentional living carry forward into every moment of your life.